Well, welcome to the Cut for Time podcast here at the Canton United Methodist Church. My name is Pastor Clay, joined by Eric Stearns, and today we're digging into the season of Lent, one of our weirdly favorite seasons. Both of us really appreciate and enjoy the season of Lent, and so we'll be talking about what sermon series we were doing for Lent, talking about the Bible study that goes along with it, and then just digging into the first sermon, which was focused on Jesus' words, "Father, forgive them; they do not know what they are doing." So let's get into it.
Sounds good. New sermon series. We're
Mhm.
in Lent now, so that's exciting.
Yes.
Um, so this sermon series is the seven sayings from the cross, and it's an Adam Hamilton book, correct?
Yeah, but I actually wrote or designed the series before I knew that Hamilton had that book. I
Nice.
really should have known because Adam Hamilton is becoming like the William Willimon of a few of the last generation. It was said of William Willimon that he does not have an unpublished thought, and Adam
Hmm.
Hamilton is starting to become that way as well. That just if there's a book to be written about it, Adam Hamilton and his research team is going to be the ones to put it out there. So, but yeah, so it's the seven statements from the cross, and then also we're supplementing it with the Adam Hamilton study.
Sure.
So yeah.
Nice. So this first one, forgive them for not. Well, why don't you say it?
So Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do,
Mm-hmm.
is the first
Okay.
statement that Jesus.
So that's the first statement.
Yep.
So maybe give us some background into why you chose this sermon series at this time.
Yeah, sure. I think that Lent is the perfect time for us to slow down. Life is crazy busy. We are already in the middle of March, and just everything has gone so fast this year, I feel like. I kind of feel like it happens every year, but just this year in particular, has just felt so fast. And so it just feels right for us to slow down.
Mhm.
And just kind of, especially because it is the season of Lent, focusing so intensely on the cross feels like the appropriate decision right now. I remember a time in ministerial association back when I was in Brookings. We had our meeting about halfway through the season of Lent, and a friend of mine was just kind of opining the fact that she just could not take any more Lent. She was just over it. And she just could not wait for the resurrection. She was just waiting so intensely for the resurrection. And someone was trying to be helpful, but it wasn't very helpful. But he pointed out that you cannot have the resurrection without the crucifixion. That something has to die first in order
Mhm.
for there to be a resurrection. And so, as we also anticipate and wait for the resurrection, it is good and right and appropriate for us to just take a second and pause here at the cross. Really take an intentional look at these statements that Jesus said. Because, like I said on Sunday, it would have been so much easier for him to just pray in silence. And no one would have ever known he was praying, but he mustered the strength to make this statement. And he's going to muster the strength to make six additional statements on top of this one. And so, what do these words mean for our faith? How does this help us to better understand the resurrection by a better understanding the crucifixion? And so I think that it's good, and I think it's a good time for us to just simply to be in this one event, be in this one moment, feel the ongoing effects of it, but to be here at the foot of the cross
Mhm.
for 6 weeks of Lent.
Well, and I think all too often the sentiment of I just want to get to the resurrection, like I get it. Um, but you have to spend time, I think, in the crucifixion because it just every year, we go over we talk about essentially the same general,
Yeah.
passages and stuff like that. And
Yep.
I always feel like it hits me differently every single year,
Mm,
and like the prayer that Jesus prays, like you said, he could have said it to himself, he could have said it in his head because, God's always listening. But I really clung to when you were talking about he had to say it because we needed to hear it,
hmm
and we need to hear it. We needed to hear it 2,000 years ago, me personally, figuratively, but because he was able to say that, I get to hear it now.
hmm
you just think about what he did for us, and at a time where um, he didn't have to, he didn't. Uh, he was at a point where like you said, you go from Palm Sunday where everyone is cheering him to a week later, and everyone's six days later, and everyone's
Yeah.
wanting him dead. Christianity isn't supposed to last, right? I mean,
Mm,
no one wanted this to continue besides 12 guys and, well, 11 and
right.
and Jesus. I mean,
Yeah.
more than that, obviously, but the 11 that we know and Jesus, and
Yep.
it shouldn't have happened. None of what we're doing right now should be possible
Mhm.
except for who Jesus was and how true it has to be.
Yep.
You know?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, and the cross is just the massive focal point of that reality. The fact that it is true that we are forgiven. The fact we're going to talk about next week with the thief on the cross, the fact that it is not too late for us to turn our hearts over to Jesus.
Mhm.
Even now, even no matter where we are in our lives, this is the time. Now is the time, because Jesus is inviting us into the kingdom. You
Yep.
know, yeah, and it just for every single one of those statements, there is that sense of reality and that sense of immediacy to all of it because these are the final moments of his life.
Mhm. So when Jesus says the statement that we talked about on Sunday, he's obviously speaking to a group of people that's standing there in front of him. And you had talked about soldiers, you had talked about, and you just think about all the people that would have been there that caused this to happen.
Hmm.
Some of them, like the soldiers, they didn't have a choice in the matter. They were doing what they were ordered to do,
Yeah, absolutely.
and witnessing
Absolutely.
something that to them, probably, well, and yeah, to them seemed weird, seemed odd that you would kill your leader like this, but
Hmm.
um, he's talking to everybody when he prays that. Um, and you had some comments on the word them in
Yeah.
in your sermon on Sunday. Do you want to expand on that at all? Is there other stuff that you had thoughts about?
Yeah, definitely. So, any time that we use a collective word like them, um, we have to define who we're talking about. That's why the whole second half of my sermon was this movement from the soldiers to the crowds to the religious leaders that caused this to happen to then us as this being our spiritual heritage. Like I said on Sunday, were you there when they crucified my Lord is a song that we're gonna be singing later in Lent. The answer, in a lot of a sense, has to be yes. Even though we weren't physically present, we still feel the effects of that larger story. When we're using collective words like that, it's important for us to define who exactly who we're talking about in that. That reminded me of an experience I had in seminary, where we were talking with one of our theology classes with Dr. Thompson, and Dr. Thompson was relaying to us the importance of these collective words and definitions. And he was talking about this time when he was watching a panel discussion, and one of the panelists was going off about how we need to do this and we need to do that and we. And one of the other panelists had to just stop this person and say, I'm sorry, but who the hell are we? I was
Mhm.
not going to say that in the sermon. I had edited that for for the sermon. I'm not going to say that from the pulpit.
Uh-huh.
But just that, you know, when we say, I just did it. When we say stuff like, well, then we need to blah blah blah. Who is the we? And so when
Mhm.
Jesus says, Father, forgive them, who is the them? Is he saying forgive these soldiers that are just following their orders, even though what they're doing is terrible? Yes. Is he saying forgive this crowd that has been so finicky in the last week of going from saying Hosanna and recognizing Jesus as Messiah for just this brief little window and then completely throwing it out the window? You know, yes, he's saying forgive them. Is he asking for the forgiveness of the religious leaders that turned their back on him and made his existence? He was had to constantly be on guard around these people because they wanted to trap him in their own way so hard. I mean, they made his existence horrible. To be on guard that much for that long, that has
Mhm.
to from a human standpoint, that stinks. But yes, Father, forgive them. And then us, we who are, the sin of the sinful, the broken, the damaged, we're lost in our sin without Jesus. And on the cross, as he is dying for our sins, he is saying, Father, forgive Eric and forgive Clay and forgive you and forgive everybody that's going to call on my name for salvation. We are included in that them as
Right.
we make that definition. So,
Yeah, I mean it's those words that um when we do something wrong, when we wrong someone just out of instinct and it's not even maybe we didn't make a conscious decision to do so.
mhm,
It's those words from Jesus on the cross that make that um go away in the end, right? I
definitely.
mean, yeah, you need to apologize for those things, you need to do whatever, but in the end, we are forgiven because of what Jesus said, you know, in
Hmm.
this first statement that we discussed.
Yeah,
And I think about too the religious leaders and Jesus asking for forgiveness on them, and it's just so crazy to me. They were just afraid of him, and
yes,
they didn't want to see this change happen because of the power that they would lose, right?
absolutely.
I mean, is essentially what it comes down to, and
Hmm.
Jesus still said it, his way is for everybody, including those people.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's just
Yeah,
bonkers to me.
yep. Yeah, between the power and the popularity and just, if the event that really set everything off was Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. Because that now they're just like, this was a very public thing. This happened in front of so many people. We've got to squash this Jesus. And
Hmm.
because, it's the popularity, it's the power. Because if Jesus' way, the way that the kingdom of God is supposed to be lived out, if people started to adopt that, there would be no need for the Pharisees and no need for the Sadducees and no need for all of these hedge laws that are completely inconsistently adjudicated against the people. You just have the law of God, and the law of God is love God and love neighbor, and figure out everything else under that paradigm. You know, that's all that we need. The law and the prophets are fulfilled in this statement. And if
Hmm.
that's all that the people need, the Pharisees and the Sadducees have absolutely no point.
Right.
Yeah. So they have to deal with Jesus. They have to get rid of Jesus.
And ultimately it backfired, and that's great. But
Right.
you
Yes.
know, I
Yep.
mean that's the exciting part, right?
Hmm. Hold that thought for a few weeks. We'll get there.
Right.
Yeah.
So this might be a good place to pause the podcast, but I've always wondered, what do we do with Judaism then?
Hmm.
Like as Christians, in
Right.
general, we're on the same side, right? I
Hmm.
mean, our basic values are essentially the same,
Yes.
but there's the whole, hey, you killed my Jesus.
Right.
Like, what are we supposed to do with that?
Yeah. So would just caution on saying that the Jews killed Jesus. The Jews could not kill Jesus. They wanted Jesus killed. They could not do it. They had to go through the Romans. They had to go through the state.
Sure.
So because that has been the basis of anti-Semitism since it
Hmm.
happened, let's caution
Hmm.
there. But how I feel is that their story got us to where we are, and we recognize Jesus, and that is where, the Apostle Paul talks about it being grafted onto a tree. Where we are bound into the DNA, we are bound into the story, we are adopted in and made into, because we do recognize Jesus as the Messiah, and Jews are still waiting for who they believe the Messiah to be. And so I think that we see them as not necessarily a mission field because we both believe in Yahweh, but also, I mean, I think of us as spiritual cousins.
Hmm.
Just they're a part of the family. We just have this disagreement about how we handle some stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's always
Yeah.
hard.
It is tricky because yeah.
What else did you want to talk about?
The only other thing that I wanted to bring up is that I thought that the line at the start of my sermon when I was talking about the final words, I thought the final words of James French would get more of a laugh than it did, or any laugh at all.
Uh-huh.
I after I said it and saw that it did not land with the congregation, I was like, "Ooh, okay, sorry, team." Um, yeah,
Oh, that's
but
funny.
it's a guy named French, and he's the one that said it. He said it
Mm-hmm.
himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I also do need to correct. I went back and listened. I think that I said 1996, or actually, I know that I said 1996. I meant 1966.
Okay.
But it was in Oklahoma. It was by electric chair, and he did say to the press that had gathered, "Hey, fellas, how about this for a headline? French fries." I
Oh,
think
that's
that's
funny that it
funny,
it did
but
go over like a fart in church.
oh man, it was real quiet. It was real quiet, and I even like paused because I thought that the people would, giggle.
Mm-hmm.
It did not. Oof, y'all.
Your
I'm
jokes
sorry.
normally stick though, so
I
that
know, right? Yeah. Even though I had a kid in confirmation a few years ago, and they're just like, well, sermons are boring. I was like, dude, my sermons aren't. I tell jokes. And they're like, well, Pastor Clay, you tell old people jokes. Ah, sir, I am sorry. What? So, yeah,
old people.
I am
Wow.
not funny to
Anyone in high
high
school
school
thinks anyone
freshmen.
who's out of college is old. So
That's true. That's very true.
the understanding of old definitely changes when you get out of college.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
But
No, so that
hmm,
did not land. And
that did not.
now we know.
Mhm.
I had a couple of I don't even know how to describe the look on a couple people's faces, but they were not happy that I said that. So
I didn't think it was that bad.
I didn't think so either. I mean, I'm the one that put it in the sermon, so
Mhm.
yeah. But and I did serious ones too. Like I did George Harrison that said, love one another. And Winston Churchill said, I'm just so bored of this all. And then he died 9 days later. And then, Todd Beamer, his whole Let's Roll, they wrote a book about it, and then talking about Wesley a little bit because I am who I am. But
Mhm.
so it's
Well,
not
you
like I
got
was
to.
telling off color last words the entire time.
No.
I just about said, when I said that sometimes final words come out of nowhere, I just about said, hold my beverage and watch this. I didn't say that, at least. So, you know,
I'm gonna tell this French fries joke and they're gonna kick me out of here.
yeah, pretty much.
I'm looking forward to the sermon series. I think this is good stuff. I always look forward to Lent and to Easter. I
Hmm.
think it's the most important time of
Absolutely.
our Christian life.
Yep,
So
definitely. Yeah, and not to give too much away, but this sermon series on the last words is going to give way to Easter and talking about the first words of the new life, the first words of resurrection. So,
sure,
talking about the Jesus about talking about Jesus making his post-resurrection appearances to Mary Magdalene, to the disciples, and just the way that he held space for people that needed to doubt for a little while, and the way that he changed Mary's life just by saying her name. Like it was in the saying of his name that Mary like got the whole thing. And so we're gonna be talking about just how important those first words are too. So
right.
yeah.
It's all just so amazing.
Hmm.
It really
Definitely.
is.
Definitely.
So what's our last words next week?
Yeah, so I'm going to be trying again on the sermon introduction since last week did not go well. I'm going to be talking about you're going to appreciate this because I'm going to try not to mention the Murtaugh list.
Mm,
But we're going to be talking about things that we are not, that it feels like it's too late to do. Because the final words we're talking about is when the thief on the cross says, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus says, surely you'll be with me in paradise. So that's the second time Jesus musters the strength to talk to someone on the cross, is offering salvation to this thief on the cross who is being duly punished for his crimes, as Jesus is being unduly punished for the sake of humanity. So we'll be talking about that statement and then just kind of talking about, how it is that we come to salvation, and is it too late for us? And is it too late for people that we love and are praying for? Or is the challenge for us in Jesus' words to continue to pray or to continue to evaluate our lives and say, my life is worth saving. I can still be saved, even though I've done X, Y, Z.
Hmm.
Sometimes we try to disqualify ourselves from God's love because of the things that we've done wrong, and Jesus just shows in stark image that that's not true. That it is never too late. So,
Yeah, no kidding. There's so many people in the Bible that can that show us that
mhm,
it's never too late for us.
absolutely, yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you don't get you know, thoughts racing through your head with this one with um it's never too late and surely you'll be with me when I, in paradise. Like
Mhm.
I don't know what's going to get you because that's just amazing to me.
Yeah.
The fact that Jesus would say that to someone who deserved to be there when he didn't just shows
Mhm.
that he's different from the rest of us.
Absolutely.
You know, that's good stuff.
Yep.
So, well, looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Um, the other question I was going to ask you, uh, do you want to kind of discuss the Bible study that we're doing? And we kind of mentioned it at the beginning that we're doing this Bible study in parallel, but I didn't know if you wanted to mention that at all for
Sure.
people or.
Yeah. So for the season of Lent, we are doing Adam Hamilton's book that corresponds with the sermon series called Final Words from the Cross. There are sessions of that immediately following worship. I mean, immediately following worship, when we get there. And then also two opportunities on Wednesday, one at 1:30 in the afternoon, which is Alicia Van Bakern's Wednesday Bible study. And then I'm teaching that right now. And then I'm also then doing it Wednesday nights after Chi Alpha as well. So
Very
all
cool.
kinds of three opportunities to get that study in during the season of Lent.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us in this week's Cut for Time podcast. Join us again next week in person at 10 a.m. at the church or back here for the podcast next week.
Thanks for listening to our Cut for Time conversation. Join us for worship in person or on Facebook Live Sundays at 10 o'clock Central Time. And now go in peace and serve the Lord.